The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Liberty. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the wide window, watching the blue and green planet of Zephyr Prime grow larger as their ship moved closer. He had been to many worlds during his 20 years as a diplomat, but this mission felt important in a way that made his stomach tight with worry. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He came from New York, where he had learned to talk to all kinds of people. That skill had served him well when humans first met alien races. Now, at 52 years old, he was one of Earth's best diplomats, but even he felt nervous about meeting the Zephyrians. "Sir, we'll reach orbit in 2 hours," said Captain Bill Norton from the pilot's chair. Norton was a steady man from Ohio, who had flown diplomatic missions for 10 years. He knew when to talk and when to stay quiet. Jake nodded and turned back to his team. They sat around a metal table in the ship's main room, going over their plans one more time. Lisa Rodriguez, their cultural expert, was reading from her tablet. She was a smart woman from California who spoke 6 languages and understood how different societies worked. "The Zephyrians value strength and honor above everything else," Lisa said. "They respect direct talk, but we must be careful not to seem weak or afraid. Their warrior culture goes back thousands of years." Colonel Sam Hayes looked up from cleaning his sidearm. The military man from Texas was there to keep them safe, but Jake hoped they would not need his protection. Sam was built like a tree trunk and had fought in 3 wars before taking this job. His presence alone made most people think twice about causing trouble. "What about their biology?" Jake asked Dr. Peter Collins, who sat across from him. The scientist from Massachusetts was thin and quiet, but he knew more about alien life than almost anyone on Earth. Peter pushed his glasses up his nose. "There. Impressive. For arms, blue scales that can change color with their mood, and they're about 7 feet tall on average. They're much stronger than humans, but they have trouble with our unpredictable nature. They like things to follow clear rules." Jake had seen pictures, but he wondered what it would be like to shake hands with a being that had 4 of them. The Zephyrians had been part of the Galactic Council for over 100 years. Humans had only joined 20 years ago, and some species still saw them as newcomers who did not belong. The mission was simple on paper. Earth needed rare minerals that could only be found on a few worlds. Zephyr Prime had plenty of these minerals, and the Zephyrians needed human technology for their farming and medical systems. It should be an easy trade that helped both sides, but Jake knew that nothing involving different species was ever truly simple. "The Zephyrian government wants this deal," Jake said, looking at each member of his team. "High Commander Colthany has been pushing for better relations with Earth, but there are others who don't like humans very much." Lisa nodded. "War Chief Elthari leads a group of younger warriors who think their people are getting soft. Call humans weak because we prefer talking to fighting. They don't understand that choosing peace when you could choose war is actually a sign of strength." Sam grunted. "Let them think we're weak. Makes our job easier if they underestimate us." Jake frowned. "Sam, we're here to build friendship, not to prove how tough we are. These people could become our allies for centuries if we handle this right." Ship shook slightly as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the window, Jake could see the golden cities of Zephyr Prime spread across red desert landscapes. Tall towers reached toward the sky, and flying vehicles moved between them like insects. It was beautiful in a way that reminded him why he loved his job. 2 hours later, they stood on the landing platform of the Zephyrian capital city. The air was hot and dry, tasting of metal and spice. Jake felt sweat form on his forehead as he adjusted his formal, diplomatic uniform. The welcoming party approached them across the platform. High Commander Colthany led the group, his blue scales shining in the afternoon sun. He was huge, even for a Zephyrian, with scars on his arms that spoke of many battles. But his 4 eyes held intelligence and something that might have been kindness. Behind him walked War Chief Elthari, younger and broader, with scales that shifted from blue to dark purple. His forearms were crossed and he stared at the humans with obvious dislike. Several other Zephyrian officials followed, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Ambassador Morrison Colthany said in perfect English, extending his upper right hand. "Welcome to Zephyr Prime. We are honored by your visit." Jake shook the offered hand, noting the careful control the alien used to keep from crushing his human fingers. "Hi, Commander. The honor is ours. Earth looks forward to building a lasting partnership with your people." Elthari stepped forward, his scales darkening to an angry red. "Partnership suggests equals. What can soft humans offer? Warriors like us?" The platform went quiet.
Ow.
Jake felt Sam tense beside him, but he kept his voice calm and respectful. "We offer what we have always offered: friendship, knowledge, and the chance to build something better together. Earth has learned that the strongest civilizations are those that grow through cooperation, not conquest." "Pretty words, Valthari," said, "but words are all humans seem to have." Colthania's scales flashed bright yellow, which Jake knew meant anger or embarrassment. War Chief Valthari speaks only for himself. "Come, Ambassador. Let us show you our city while we talk." The next 3 days passed in a blur of meetings, meals, and cultural exchanges. Jake found himself liking Colthani more each day. The High Commander was smart, fair, and genuinely interested in what humans could offer his people. They talked about art, science, philosophy during long walks through the city's gardens. Lisa spent hours with Zephyrian historians, learning about their culture and sharing stories of Earth. Peter worked with their scientists, comparing notes on biology and medicine. Even Sam found common ground with some of their military officers, sharing stories of battles and tactics, but Valthari and his followers remained hostile. They watched the humans with cold eyes and made comments about human weakness whenever they thought no one was listening. Jake noticed that more young Zephyrians seemed to agree with the war chief as the days passed. "They see cooperation as surrender," Lisa told Jake on their third night. They sat in their guest quarters, reviewing the day's progress. "Valthari is telling them that working with humans will make them soft and weak." "Colthani has the final say," Jake replied, "and he wants this agreement. Tomorrow, we sign the trade deal, and then we go home with a new alliance." Peter looked up from his research notes. "I hope you're right, but I've been watching their body language. Valthari's group is planning something. Their scales keep shifting. 2 hunting patterns when they look at us." Sam checked his weapon one more time. "Maybe we should leave tonight. Get off this rock before something bad happens." Jake shook his head. "We're diplomats. Running away would destroy any chance of future relations. Besides, we're under Colophony's protection. They wouldn't dare attack us here." Outside their window, the golden towers of the Zephyrian city glowed in the light of 3 moons. It was beautiful and peaceful. Jake went to sleep that night, thinking about how proud Earth would be when he returned with a successful treaty. He had no way of knowing that. Valthari and 50 of his followers were meeting in secret, planning something that would change the relationship between humans and aliens forever. The war chief's scales were blood red as he spoke to his warriors about honor, strength, and what they needed to do to save their people from the weakness of peace. The morning of their final day on Zephyr Prime started like any other. Jake Morrison woke up early and watched the sunrise paint the golden towers of the city in warm light. He felt good about their mission. The trade agreement was ready to sign, and High Commander Colthani had promised a celebration dinner that evening. Jake dressed in his best uniform and joined. Lisa Rodriguez was excited about the cultural exchange program they had planned. Peter Collins talked about the medical research projects Earth and Zephyr Prime would share. Even Sam Hayes seemed relaxed, joking with the Zephyrian guards who had become friendly over the past few days. "I think we did something special here," Jake told his team as they ate. "This partnership could last for centuries." At noon, they signed the treaty in Colthani's Great Hall. The High Commander's scales were bright gold with happiness as he pressed his 4 hands to the document alongside Jake's signature. Representatives from both worlds witnessed the moment that would bind their species together in trade and friendship. "Today begins a new chapter," Colthani said in his deep voice. "Our peoples will grow stronger together." Jake smiled and shook all 4 of the alien leaders' hands. Earth is honored to call Zephyr Prime a friend. That evening, the celebration dinner was held in the human embassy compound. It was a large building made of white stone, with gardens and fountains that reminded Jake of home. 30 human civilians lived there, working as traders, teachers, and researchers. Their families had made lives on this alien world, building bridges between the two species. The main hall was decorated with flowers from both worlds. Human and Zephyrian officials sat together at long tables, sharing food and stories. Children ran between the tables, human and young Zephyrians playing games together. It was exactly what Jake had hoped to see. Danny Clark, a young communications worker from Oregon, was setting up the recording equipment to send news of their success back to Earth. He was 23 years old and had volunteered for this assignment to see other worlds. His parents back home were proud of their son working for peace between species. "Make sure you get a good shot of the treaty signing recreation," Jake told Danny. Earth needs to see how well this went. At 8 in the evening, the speeches began. Colthany spoke about the future they would build together. Jake talked about the friendship between their peoples. Human children in the audience clapped when he finished. That was when the lights went out. Emergency lighting came on a few seconds later, casting everything in red shadows. Jake heard confused voices and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. Then he heard something that made his blood go cold. The sound of energy. Weapons charging. War Chief Velthari burst through the main doors with 50 armed warriors behind him. Their scales were dark red with battle rage and their forearms carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. They moved with the speed and skill of born killers. "Nobody move," Velthari roared. "Tonight, we save our people from weakness." Jake stepped forward, his hands raised peacefully. "War Chief, please. There are civilians here. Children. This is a place of diplomacy." Velthari's upper right arm pointed an energy rifle at Jake's chest. "Diplomacy is surrender. You have made our people soft with your talk of peace and cooperation. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who try to weaken warriors." "You don't have to do this," Jake said, still trying to reach some spark of reason in the angry alien. "We can talk about your concerns. Find a solution that works for everyone." The War Chief's response was to pull the trigger. The energy blast hit Jake in the chest, throwing him backward into a table. The ambassador tried to get up, tried to keep talking, but the weapon had burned through his heart. He died thinking about his wife back on Earth and hoping his team would survive. That was when the real horror began. Lisa Rodriguez ran toward the communications room, trying to send a distress signal to Earth. She made it halfway across the hall, before 3 warriors surrounded her. She fought them with everything she had, scratching and biting, but they were too strong. Her last act was to slam her hand down on the emergency transmission button, sending a partial message to the human fleet in orbit. Colonel Sam Hayes tried to organize a defense. He drew his sidearm and shot 2 of the attackers before more energy blasts cut him down. Some of the Zephyrian officials who had been friendly to humans tried to help, but Veltharia's warriors killed them too. Dr. Peter Collins was trying to help wounded people when the warriors found him. He was kneeling beside a hurt child, using his medical knowledge to stop the bleeding. A warrior grabbed him by the hair and forced him to watch as they killed the child in front of him. Then they executed Peter with a blade to the neck. The massacre spread through the entire compound. The warriors hunted down every human they could find. Traders who had lived on Zephyr Prime for years were dragged from their homes and killed in the streets. Teachers who had been helping Zephyrian children learn about Earth were shot down as they tried to run. Families were torn apart. Bob Martinez from Texas was killed trying to protect his wife and daughter. His wife Helen died shielding their 8-year-old girl who was murdered anyway. The warriors showed no mercy to anyone, no matter how young or innocent. Danny Clark was in the basement when the attack started. He had been checking the communication equipment when the lights went out. He heard the screaming and weapons fire above him, but he was too scared to move. Through the security cameras, he watched his friends and colleagues die one by one. His hands shook as he tried to work the communication system. The equipment was damaged, but Lisa's emergency signal had opened a channel to Earth. Danny began recording everything he saw, sending the terrible images across space to his home world. He knew he was probably going to die, but maybe his recordings would tell Earth what had happened. The killing went on for 2 hours. Velthari's warriors were thorough. They went room by room, checking every corner and closet, He found families hiding in storage areas and maintenance tunnels. They killed them all. By the time High Commander Colthany arrived with loyal troops, it was too late. The compound was full of bodies. Human blood stained the white stone walls. The flowers from the celebration dinner were scattered among the dead. Colthany's scales went completely white with shock and grief. He had known Velthari was angry, but he never imagined the young warrior would do something like this. The High Commander ordered his troops to arrest every one of Velthari's followers who was still alive. "You have doomed our people," Colthany told Velthari as they put chains on the war chief. "The humans will never forgive this. Never." Velthari's scales were still red with battle rage. "Good, let them come. We'll show them how real warriors fight. No more talk of peace and weakness. Only blood and honor." In the basement, Danny Clark was the only human left alive in the compound. He had recorded everything. The images of the massacre, the sound of children screaming, the sight of his friends being butchered like animals. His hands were covered in his own blood from gripping the broken equipment so tightly he kept transmitting until rescue. Ships arrived 6 hours later. The images he sent reached Earth long before the official reports. Within hours, every human on every world had seen what the Zephyrians had done to their diplomats and civilians. When they found Danny, he was still sitting in front of the communication system, staring at screens that showed empty rooms full of bodies. He had not moved in 8 hours. The young man who had come to Zephyr Prime, believing in peace between species, had watched that dream die in blood and fire. The rescue team wrapped him in a blanket and carried him to their ship. As they lifted off from the compound, Danny looked down at the place where 37 humans had been murdered for the crime of believing in friendship between the stars. On Earth, President Maria Santos was already calling an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council. The images Danny had sent were being broadcast on every network. Crowds were gathering in the streets, demanding justice for their murdered citizens. The age of human diplomacy was ending.
The HFY War was
about to begin. The first images from Zephyr Prime reached Earth at 3 a.m, Geneva time. Danny Clark's broken transmission came through the deep space communication network, carrying pictures that would change everything. The overnight staff at the Global Communications Center stared at their screens in horror. Within an hour, President Maria Santos was awake in her private quarters in the Global Defense Council building. The former general from Florida had seen war before, but nothing had prepared her for what she watched on the secure transmission. Her hands clenched into fists as she saw the bodies of children scattered around the embassy compound. "Get me, General?" Price and Secretary White immediately, she told her aide, and call an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Full membership, tell them to come now. By dawn, leaders from every nation on Earth were gathering in the council chambers. The room was built to hold representatives from all human governments, a symbol of the unity that had brought peace to Earth 50 years earlier. Now that unity would be tested in a way no one had imagined. General Henry Price arrived first. The tall man from Virginia had commanded troops in 3 conflicts, but his face was pale as he reviewed the intelligence reports. Behind him came Secretary of Defense Carol White from Ohio, her usual calm demeanor cracked by what she had seen. "How many?" President Santos asked as they sat down at the main table. 37 confirmed dead, General Price said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "All civilians, except for the diplomatic team." The youngest victim was 6 years old. News anchor Tony Mitchell was already broadcasting the story across Earth's networks. His normally steady voice shook as he described what had happened. "Images we are about to show are disturbing, but the world needs to see what was done to our people. The Zephyrian extremists showed no mercy to anyone, including children. It's footage played on screens around the world. In New York, crowds began gathering in Central Park, holding pictures of the dead diplomats. In London, people stood silent outside the global embassy. In Tokyo, students organized protests demanding justice for the murdered families. President Santos stood before the assembled council leaders. The chamber was full, with representatives from every major nation and colony world. She looked at each face before she spoke. 6 hours ago, 37 human beings were murdered on Zephyr Prime. They were not soldiers. They were diplomats, teachers, doctors, and families who believed in peace between our species. They were butchered like animals by Zephyrian extremists who saw our desire for friendship as weakness. The images played again on the chamber's main screen. Ambassador Morrison falling as the energy blast hit him. Lisa Rodriguez fighting desperately to send her warning. Children crying for their parents who would never come home. The Zephyrian government has offered to execute the killers, Santos continued. High Commander Colthany has apologized and promised justice, but apologies will not bring back our dead. Justice will not erase what the galaxy has seen. Secretary White stood up, was known for her careful approach to foreign policy, always choosing diplomacy over violence. Madam President, we must consider the consequences. If we respond with military force, we risk starting a war that could spread across the galaxy. Perhaps economic sanctions would be more appropriate. General Price slammed his hand on the table. Economic sanctions. They murdered children, Carol. They killed diplomatic staff under a flag of truce. They hunted down civilians who were there. To help their people? What kind of message does it send if we respond to genocide with trade restrictions? The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The images from Zephyr Prime had done their work. Every representative had seen the bodies. Every leader had heard the screams in Danny Clark's recordings. Prime Minister Janet Foster from Britain spoke for many when she said, "We have tried to be good neighbors to the galaxy. We have shared our technology, our culture, our friendship. We have been patient with species who called us weak. But there must be a line that cannot be crossed. They crossed it when they murdered our children." The vote was held at noon, Geneva time. The question was simple. Should humanity declare total war against the Zephyrian Empire? The representatives pressed their buttons one by one.
The final
Count appeared on the main screen, 847 in favor. 23 against. President Santos felt the weight of history as she signed the declaration. She thought about her own daughter, safe at home, and about the 6-year-old girl who had died on Zephyr Prime for the crime of being human. As of this moment, she announced to the chamber and the watching world, humanity is at war with the Zephyrian Empire. We did not choose this fight, but we will finish it. They wanted to test our strength. They will learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The declaration was broadcast across human space within minutes. Mars, the great shipyards, began working overtime. In the asteroid belt, mining operations shifted to producing military materials. On distant colony worlds, young men and women lined up to join the military. Admiral Kevin Ross from Maine was called to the Global Defense Council that afternoon. The veteran naval commander had fought space pirates and hostile aliens before, but never in a full-scale war. Santos looked at him across her desk in the secure briefing room. "Kevin, I'm giving you command of the entire war effort. You have unlimited resources and complete authority over all human military forces. Your mission is simple. Destroy the Zephyrian Empire's ability to wage war, make sure they never threaten human civilians again." Ross was a quiet man who had spent his career protecting merchant ships and colonies, but his eyes were hard when he nodded. "They made a mistake, Madam President. They think we're soft because we choose peace when we can. They're about to learn that choosing peace and being unable to fight are two very different things." Within hours, the machinery of war was turning. Research stations that had been working on peaceful projects switched to developing new weapons. Dr. Helen Chang from California began designing missiles that could penetrate Zephyrian shields. Engineer Mark Thompson from Nevada started building automated factories that could produce warships faster than anyone thought possible. The speed of the mobilization shocked even Earth's allies in the Galactic Council. Ambassador Kritak of the Vorthan Confederation sent a worried message to Santos. "We have watched humans for 20 years. You seem to prefer trade and diplomacy to warfare? We did not know you possessed such military capability." Santos replied, "Personally, we never wanted you to know. Hoped we would never need to show you. But they killed our envoy. They murdered our children. Now the galaxy will see what human beings do when our families are threatened." The first human battle fleets were ready to launch within 2 weeks. Ships that had been used for exploration and trade were converted to carry weapons. New vessels came off the production lines every day, crewed by volunteers who had seen the images from Zephyr Prime. Captain Roy Turner from Michigan would lead the ground forces. The former Army officer had fought in colonial conflicts, but never anything like this. As he reviewed the intelligence reports on Zephyrian military strength, he felt a cold anger settle in his chest. "They think they know how to fight," he told his staff. "They think their warrior culture makes them superior to humans. They're about to learn that being born to fight and choosing to fight are not the same thing. We've been holding back for 20 years. That ends now." News reports showed the massive war effort taking shape, factories working around the clock, training centers full of new recruits, shipyards launching new vessels every day. The entire human economy had shifted to support the war in a matter of weeks. On Zephyr Prime, High Commander Coltheny watched the reports with growing fear. He had tried to prevent the massacre. He had arrested Valtheri and his followers. He had offered every apology and promise of justice he could think of. But he could see it was too late. "How many ships do the humans have?" he asked his military advisors. "Our intelligence suggests perhaps 100 major vessels," came the reply. "Their technology is impressive, but they are still newcomers to space warfare. Our fleet numbers over 1,000 ships, crewed by warriors bred for battle." Colthany's scales flickered with worry. "You are thinking like Valtheri. These humans have been exploring space for decades. They have colonies across dozens of systems. They have resources we cannot match. And now they have something more dangerous than weapons or ships." "What is that, High Commander? They have a reason to fight that goes beyond glory or conquest?" "They are fighting for their dead children. It makes them more dangerous than any warrior culture in the galaxy." 3 weeks after the massacre, the first human battle fleet jumped into hyperspace, heading for Zephyrian territory. Admiral Ross stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Around him, his officers worked quietly, their faces set with grim determination. The ship's communication officer looked up from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving a message from the Zephyrian government. High Commander Colthany wants to negotiate." Ross stared at the tactical display showing Zephyrian space. "Let's tell the High Commander that humanity tried negotiation once. It got our diplomats killed and our children murdered." The first battle happened at the Korvac system 3 months after the massacre. Admiral Kevin Ross watched from the bridge of the UES Vengeance as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 50 human warships faced a Zephyrian defense force of 200 vessels. The enemy had been waiting for them. "They outnumber us 4-1, said Captain Bill Stone from the tactical station. The officer from Colorado had fought pirates before, but never in a battle this size. Ross studied the enemy formation on his screen. The Zephyrian ships were big and powerful, built for frontal attacks by a warrior culture that valued strength over strategy. "Numbers don't win wars, Captain. Smart fighting does. Signal the fleet. Execute Plan Alpha." What happened next shocked the Zephyrians. Instead of charging forward like warriors, the human ships split into small groups and attacked. From all directions at once, they used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Human weapons were designed to be precise, targeting key systems instead of trying to destroy whole ships. Commander Susan Blake led the destroyer squadron from her ship.
"Oh, the UES Thunder."
The woman from Oregon had studied Zephyrian ship designs for months, looking for weaknesses. She found them in their power systems. "Target their main reactors," she ordered her weapons officer. "One precise hit, and their whole ship goes dark." The human missiles were smaller than Zephyrian weapons, but they were smart. They could change direction in flight and find the exact spot they needed to hit. Within an hour, half the Zephyrian fleet was floating dead in space, their crews trapped in ships without power. The surviving Zephyrian commander tried to retreat, but human ships were faster. They had been built for exploration, designed to travel between distant stars quickly. Now that speed became a weapon. The enemy ships were hunted down one by one as they tried to escape. When the battle ended, 200 Zephyrian ships were destroyed or captured. The human fleet had lost only 3 vessels. Ross looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage and felt no satisfaction. This was just the beginning. "Send a message to all Zephyrian forces in this sector," he ordered. "Tell them they have 1 hour to surrender. Any ship that tries to fight will be destroyed. Any ship that surrenders will be spared, but their crews will be prisoners until this war ends." News of the victory reached Earth within hours. People celebrated in the streets, but President Santos knew this was only the start. She met with her war cabinet in the secure briefing room beneath the Global Defense Council building. "The Zephyrians are learning that their ships can't match our technology," said Secretary of Defense Carol White. "But they still have their ground forces. Those warriors are tough and experienced." General Price looked up from his reports. "That's where Captain Turner comes in. He's been training our ground troops for exactly this kind of fight." Captain Roy Turner was on the troop transport U.S. Liberty, heading for the Zephyrian colony world of Tex Prime. Behind him sat 500 human soldiers in powered armor suits that made them stronger and faster than any normal person. Were not the same humans who had died helplessly on Zephyr Prime. Turner walked between the rows of soldiers, checking their equipment. Each suit of armor was a masterpiece of human engineering, powered by fusion batteries and controlled by computer systems that could react faster than thought. The soldiers wearing them were volunteers who had trained for months to use these weapons of war. "Remember what we learned," Turner told his troops. "The Zephyrians are stronger than us individually, but they fight like warriors from old stories. They charge straight ahead and try to overwhelm enemies with force. We're going to show them what modern warfare looks like." Sergeant Lisa Park from Texas raised her hand. "What about civilians, sir? Do we protect Zephyrian non-combatants?" Turner's face was hard, but his voice was clear. "We are not them. We don't target civilians or children. But any Zephyrian who points a weapon at human soldiers will be treated as an enemy combatant. Our mission is to break their military completely so they can never threaten human civilians again." The landing on Tex Prime was unlike anything the Zephyrians had expected. Human dropships came down from space like falling stars protected by shields that deflected energy weapons. Instead of landing in one place for a big battle, they scattered across the planet in small groups. Zephyrian General Mordock had prepared for a glorious battle against human invaders. He had positioned his warriors in strong defensive positions around the main cities, ready to crush the weak humans with superior numbers and strength. But the humans didn't attack the cities. Instead, they struck at communication towers, power plants, supply depots, and transportation hubs. Within 6 hours, the Zephyrian military on Tex Prime could not talk to each other, had no electricity, and could not move supplies to their forces. The human soldiers moved like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before help could arrive. Dr. Nancy Foster back on Earth had designed new weapons specifically for fighting Zephyrians. Her laboratory in Washington had studied captured enemy equipment and biological samples for months. The weapons her team created were not meant to kill quickly, but to disable Zephyrian warriors without harming nearby civilians. "Their nervous systems work differently than ours," she explained to the weapons development team. "These electromagnetic pulse grenades will paralyze them for hours without permanent damage. We can win this war without becoming monsters like them." The new weapons worked perfectly. Human soldiers could take down groups of Zephyrian warriors without killing them, capturing military equipment in strategic positions with minimal casualties on both sides. It was war fought with precision instead of rage. Engineer Craig Phillips in Nevada had solved the supply problem that had worried military planners. His automated manufacturing systems could build weapons, ammunition, and equipment in space, using materials from asteroid mining operations. Human forces never ran out of supplies, while Zephyrian logistics broke down completely. "We can keep this up forever," Phillips reported to Admiral Ross. "Our production capacity is growing every week. Our manufacturing is being destroyed faster than they can replace it." The psychological warfare was even more effective than the military campaign. Every human broadcast, every piece of propaganda carried the same message. "You killed our envoy. You slaughtered our civilians. You chose this war." The humans did not just want to win battles. They wanted every Zephyrian to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Videos of the massacre on Zephyr Prime were broadcast on captured communication networks. Images of human children killed by Zephyrian warriors were shown alongside pictures of Zephyrian prisoners being treated with respect and medical care. "See the difference?" the human voices said. "We protect even our enemies. You murdered our children." Other alien species in the Galactic Council watched the war with growing amazement and fear. The peaceful humans who had spent 20 years sharing art, science, friendship, had revealed a capacity for warfare that exceeded even the most militaristic races. Ambassador Vorthok of the Hegemony sent an urgent message to his government. "We have gravely misjudged the humans. Preference for peace was not weakness, but choice. Now that they have chosen war, they prosecute it with an efficiency that terrifies me. They do not fight like warriors seeking glory. They fight like exterminators removing a pest." The Zephyrian military began to collapse after 6 months of human attacks. Their communication networks were destroyed. Their supply lines were cut. Their colonies were isolated and under siege. Worst of all, their warriors were losing the will to fight. Zephyrian soldiers had been raised on stories of glorious battle against worthy enemies. But there was no glory in being hunted by invisible enemies who struck without warning. There was no honor in watching their equipment be systematically destroyed while they could do nothing to stop it. War Chief Valtheri, the architect of the massacre, sat in a prison cell on Zephyr Prime. High Commander Kolthani visited him there, his scales gray with exhaustion and despair. "Are you satisfied?" Kolthani asked. "Your glorious war is destroying our people. Half our colonies have surrendered. Our fleet is scattered or destroyed. Our warriors are demoralized and broken." Valtheria's scales had lost their red color of rage. Now they were dull brown, the color of defeat and shame. "I thought they were weak. I thought their talk of peace made them soft. I was wrong." "You were worse than wrong," Kolthani said. "You were a fool who doomed our entire civilization. Because you could not tell the difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight." On the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Admiral Ross received daily reports of new victories. Human forces had captured 12 Zephyrian colonies. Enemy fleet strength was down by 70%. Industrial capacity in Zephyrian space had dropped to almost nothing, but Ross took no pleasure in the numbers. Each victory brought them closer to the final assault on Zephyr Prime itself. When that battle came, the war would be over. The Zephyrian Empire would be broken, and the galaxy would see what happened to species that murdered human children. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Set course for Zephyr Prime. It's time to finish this." The final battle for Zephyr Prime lasted 3 days. Admiral Kevin Ross brought the entire human fleet to the Zephyrian homeworld. Over 300 ships carrying the combined might of Earth's war machine. The planet's orbital defenses had been strong once, but 18 months of war had worn them down to almost nothing. High Commander Kolthani stood in his command center, watching the human ships surround his world. His scales were white with grief and exhaustion. Around him, his remaining officers waited for orders that everyone knew would not change the outcome. "They are requesting our surrender," reported his communication officer. "Admiral Ross promises that civilians will not be harmed if we lay down our weapons." Kolthani looked at the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships in perfect formation around his planet. He thought about the massacre that had started this war, the 30 innocent humans who had died because of Valtharia's hatred and pride. "Signal our surrender," he said quietly. "Order all military units to lay down their weapons. The war is over." The Zephyrian military surrendered without firing a shot. Their warriors, who had been taught that death in battle was the highest honor, gave up their weapons, rather than fight a war they could not win. It was the final proof that the human campaign had broken more than just their military strength. Captain Roy Turner led the human occupation forces as they landed in the capital city. His soldiers moved through the streets in their powered armor, but they found no resistance. Zephyrian civilians watched from windows and doorways, their scales showing the gray of defeat and fear. Turner set up his headquarters in the same building where Ambassador Morrison had signed the trade agreement. 2 years before, he thought about that as he walked through rooms where diplomats had once planned for peace between their species. The trials began 6 months later. A special court was established in the human embassy compound, in the same hall where the massacre had taken place. The building had been repaired, but bloodstains still marked the white stone walls where humans had died. Judge Advocate General Patricia Young from Arizona presided over the trials. She was a fair woman who had spent her career upholding military law, but the evidence she reviewed made her angry. Video recordings, witness testimony, physical evidence, all painted the same picture of deliberate murder. Hi. Commander Colthaney was the first to face trial. He stood before the human court with his 4 hands bound, his scales gray with shame. The charges against him were simple: failure to prevent war crimes and failure to protect diplomatic personnel under his government's protection. High Commander, Judge Young said, you are accused of allowing the massacre of human civilians and diplomatic staff. How do you plead? Colthaney raised his head and spoke clearly. I plead guilty to all charges. I failed to protect the humans under my care. I failed to stop Velthari when I should have seen what he was planning. The blood of 37 innocent people is on my hands. The courtroom was silent. Even the human prosecutors had not expected such a complete admission of guilt. Young studied the alien leader who had tried to build friendship between their species. The court recognizes that you attempted to prevent this tragedy and that you immediately arrested the perpetrators, she said. However, as the leader responsible for the safety of diplomatic personnel, you must face the consequences of your failure. You were sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the possibility of parole after 10 years if you cooperate fully with war crimes investigations. War Chief Velthari faced a different kind of justice. The architect of the massacre showed no remorse as he stood trial for the murder of 37 humans. His scales had returned to their natural blue, and his 4 eyes burned with unrepentant hatred. I regret nothing, he told the court. We are warriors. You are weak creatures who try to solve everything with talk and compromise. I showed the galaxy what real strength looks like. Captain Andy Cooper from Montana was in the courtroom that day. His sister Jenny had been one of the teachers killed in the massacre. She had been 26 years old, fresh out of college. Excited about her assignment to help Zephyrian children learn about Earth culture, Judge Young read the verdict. Velthari of the Zephyrian Empire, you are found guilty of 37 counts of murder, genocide, and war crimes. You deliberately targeted civilians, including children. You violated every law of war and civilization. You were sentenced to death. Captain Cooper was chosen to carry out the execution. Military tradition allowed family members of victims to serve as executioners in cases of war crimes. He stood before Velthari in the execution chamber, his hand steady on his sidearm. Any last words? Cooper asked. Velthari looked at the human officer with something that might have been respect. We underestimated your species. We saw mercy and mistook it for weakness. We thought your desire for peace made you unable to fight. We were wrong. Cooper pulled the trigger. Velthari died instantly, joining the 37 humans whose murders had started the war. It's destroyed his empire. The reconstruction of Zephyrian society took years. President Maria Santos appointed civilian administrators to work with reformed Zephyrian leaders, rebuilding their government without the warrior culture that had led to war. It was slow work, but it was necessary. Dr. Helen Chang, who had designed weapons to fight the Zephyrians, now worked on projects to help them. Her team developed new farming techniques and medical treatments that would improve life on the rebuilt worlds. It was her way of proving that humans could create as efficiently as they could destroy. The galaxy watched the reconstruction with amazement. The same species that had crushed the Zephyrian military in 18 months now spent years helping their former enemies rebuild. Other alien governments began to understand that human mercy was not weakness, but a choice made from strength. Danny Clark returned to Zephyr Prime 5 years after the massacre. He was no longer the scared young man who had hidden in a basement. While his friends were murdered, now he was Earth's new ambassador to the reformed Zephyrian government, carrying on the diplomatic mission that Morrison had started. His first official act was to visit the memorial built where the embassy compound had once stood. 37 white stone pillars rose from a garden filled with flowers from both Earth and Zephyr Prime. Each pillar bore the name of a human who had died there. Danny stood before Ambassador Morrison's memorial and read the inscription. He died believing in peace. His death taught the galaxy the price of war. I will continue your work, Danny said quietly. But the galaxy will remember what happens to those who mistake our kindness for weakness. The new embassy was built on the same site, but this time it was different. Human Marines stood guard at the gates, and orbital defense platforms protected it from space. The building itself was a fortress disguised as a diplomatic facility. Beautiful but impregnable, Colthany was released from prison after serving 8 years of his sentence. He had cooperated fully with war crimes investigations, and had helped establish the new Zephyrian government that rejected the warrior culture of the past. Danny met with him in the embassy's main hall. Ambassador Clark, the former High Commander, said, his scales showing the deep blue of respect. I know that nothing I say can bring back those who died, but I want you to know that my people have learned from our mistakes. We will never again confuse peace with weakness. Danny nodded. The memorial outside reminds us every day of what happened here. But this embassy also represents hope. Humans and Zephyrians working together, building something better from the ashes of tragedy. Construction began on a new space station above Zephyr Prime. It would be called the Morrison Peace Center, a place where diplomats from across the galaxy could meet to resolve conflicts without war. The station was defended by both human and reformed Zephyrian forces, a symbol of cooperation built on the foundation of remembered tragedy. President Santos, now in her second term, spoke at the dedication ceremony. This station stands as proof that peace is possible, even after the worst hatred and violence. But it also serves as a warning. The ships that protect this station, the weapons that guard this peace, they remind the galaxy that humanity will defend innocent life with whatever force is necessary. The Morrison Peace Center became a model for the galaxy. Species that had solved disputes through war for thousands of years now came to talk instead of fight. The center's success proved that the massacre on Zephyr Prime, terrible as it was, had taught the galaxy a valuable lesson about the true strength of peaceful species. But in the military academies of Earth, in the training centers where human soldiers learned their craft, the story of Ambassador Morrison and his team was taught to every recruit. The lesson was simple. Humans prefer peace, but they are very good at war. Danny Clark often walked through the memorial garden in the evening, reading the names of the dead and thinking about the future. The galaxy was more peaceful now, but that peace was protected by the knowledge of what had happened when someone had tested humanity's resolve. The stars above Zephyr Prime looked the same as they had when Morrison first arrived, with dreams of friendship between species. But now, they've shone down on a galaxy that understood the difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight.